The Norbe VIII was a drill ship which was holding position using dynamic positioning at the Marlin oil field off the coast of Brazil. That was a sunny day and a calm sea. The incident occurred during daylight in the auxiliary boiler room. The auxiliary boiler room was located at the stern of the vessel on the main deck level. The vessel has 2 auxiliary boilers. The boilers were solely used for well test operations. The boilers were of vertical water tube design and had an operating pressure of 7 bar and a maximum permissible operating pressure of 9.18 bar. Each boiler was equipped with 2 independently operating pressure safety valves, which were designed to open automatically at a pressure equal to or lower than the maximum operating pressure of the boiler. Vessel engine team. The chief engineer. Charlie was a 51-year-old man who held an officer in charge of an engineering watch certificate of competency. The second engineer. Carlos was a 33-year-old man who held an officer in charge of an engineering watch certificate of competency. Service team. Service technician. John was a 44-year-old man who held a certificate in safety training in boiler operation. Service technician Sanchez was a 28-year-old man who held a certificate in safety training in boiler operation. On June 7, 2017, 2 service technicians from the Instituto de Metrologia Industrial Ltd., IMI, boarded the Norbe VIII by helicopter to carry out the annual maintenance of the vessel's 2 auxiliary boilers. That evening, the ship's engineers on duty were asked to warm up the boilers and begin preparations for the maintenance. At around 11:20 p.m., after a leak had been detected in the sight glass of boiler number 1, and the associated gasket had been replaced, the boilers were put back into operation. Shortly afterwards, the pressure safety valves opened.
The safety valve of boiler number 1 opened at 1.9 bars and that of boiler number 2 at 5.9 bars. Both opening pressures are well below the working pressure of the boilers of 7 bars. Over the next 4 hours, the boilers were shut down and restarted 3 times. During all these restarts, the pressure safety valves functioned abnormally each time.
The next morning, June 8, 2017, Chief Engineer Charlie was informed that the boilers were not ready for servicing due to the apparent problems with the pressure safety valves. Chief Engineer Charlie, together with Second Engineer Carlos and service technicians John and Sanchez, started the boilers to test the pressure safety valves. It was found that the valves were opening below the working pressure of the boilers. At around 12 noon, the boilers were shut down and allowed to cool down so that the technicians could overhaul the pressure safety valves. Later, the technicians were observed calibrating manometers, and the boilers were left isolated until the next day shift. At the pre-work meeting on June 9, 2017, at 6 a.m., the overhaul of the pressure safety valves was discussed. The service technicians went into the boiler room together with a second assistant engineer of the ship. Shortly after 7 a.m., the boilers were started and almost immediately triggered alarms in the engine room monitoring system. Over the next 36 minutes, more than 20 alarms were acknowledged. At 7:38 a.m. on 9 June 2017, boiler No. 1 failed catastrophically, filling the boiler room with steam. The 2 service technicians, John and Sanchez, and the ship's second engineer, Carlos, who were in the boiler room, suffered severe burns and respiratory injuries. Another crew member, a welder working on the deck outside the boiler room, was injured when the boiler room's weather-tight door was blown open, allowing the pressure to escape into the atmosphere. The explosion was immediately detected by the ship's fire alarm system, and shortly afterwards, the rescue and medical personnel were directed to the scene. At 7:48 a.m., the ship's general alarm was sounded and the firefighting team was mobilized. It was confirmed that no fire had broken out and the injured were taken to the ship's hospital. At 9:52 a.m., the first of 2 medevac helicopters arrived and the 4 casualties were evacuated over the next 3 hours.
The 2 service technicians, John and Sanchez, and the ship's second engineer, Carlos, died of the injuries sustained in the incident.
Norbe VIII's auxiliary boiler number 1 exploded due to overpressure in the boiler's water chamber, which led to an internal structural failure. This failure allowed ingress of superheated water to enter the boiler's furnace, where it turned to steam and expanded rapidly. The highly pressurized steam escaped after rupturing the furnace floor and fire hole, fatally injuring the 3 workers in the boiler room. The service engineers had set the boiler's pressure safety valves so that they were isolated based on a common mental model that they opened below the set pressure. The boiler's pressure sensors were not operating as required. Boilers are equipment operating at high pressure and temperatures. Carelessness can have fatal consequences. For this reason, all safety precautions should be taken when carrying out maintenance work on the boiler, and the subject of the intervention should be clearly understood.